Hi there, I'm Haruka. I like talking about anime and sports, so I want to talk about a sports anime that I think is kind of pretty important. When you think of sports anime, it's probably something like Haikyuu or Kuroko Basketball, where it's a big shonen battle where players somehow have mystical powers that help them be better than their opponents. While that's great for most weebs and most jocks, and somehow this jock weeb right here isn't that big a fan of those shows. Maybe due to my own personal weeb upbringing, I never really got into shows with big fantasy elements. What drew me into anime was realism, maybe a bit of the supernatural, but the core of the story being about real human emotions and people. So when many of these shows put a deeper focus into analogies and equating what's happening on screen to some kind of magic, it pulls me out. I like being shown what actual sports look like in an animated form. Unfortunately, it's hard to find any sports anime that takes pride in its realistic animation. Then one day, I found a new show about badminton. Freaking badminton. And I loved it. Well, sort of. Hanebado is the story of a high school badminton team, mainly focusing on first year Ayano Hanasaki. Ayano grew up as a badminton prodigy, but had quit prior to getting into high school because reasons, I guess. Anyway, her friend Elena convinces her to join the badminton team because she figures that she could try to find a love of badminton again. And that sort of happens, but not in the way poor, sweet Elena wanted. Word gets out that this former prodigy is back in the game and a target is painted onto Ayano's back. Ayano soon becomes haunted by a couple of demons. First comes Karuko, who was the one who had beaten Ayano so hard when she was a kid that Mama Hanasaki just straight up abandoned her child and moved to Denmark. Then Ayano faces down Kani, the Danish girl that her mom had trained and raised instead of her. All of this warps Ayano from the sweet, shy little girl to prime Zlatan Ibrahimovic. Meanwhile, her senpai Nagisa Aragaki is facing her own demon, since Ayano had once crushed her so badly that she considered quitting the sport altogether. Nagisa walks her own path down badminton, struggling with a knee injury while also having to go up against a former friend who was chosen over her to go to a much more prestigious badminton school. This all finally comes to a head in a climactic championship match between Ayano and Nagisa. It is one of the most beautiful things, but I will get to that when I get to that. First, let's talk about why I love this show. Right off the bat, Hanebado has girl muscles. I know this is a weird thing to talk about, but think about how many girls in anime that are referred to as strong, but look the same as literally every other waifu. Somehow, Leiden Films, a studio who up until this point was probably best known for butchering the 2016 remake of Berserk, and director Shinpai Izaki, a guy whose only series director credit to this point was the nearly universally panned Gunslinger Stratos, pulled together and delivered a masterclass in sports choreography and animation. You can see the leg muscles strain under the girl's shifting weight, and there's this sense of realistic movement in every action on the court. And you may think that this was just the case of budgeting for Sakuga during matches, but the animation stays pretty consistent even during moments off the court. Though you don't get all the extra detail, there isn't very much of the show that looks poorly made. When it comes to the plot itself, there are a couple of characters whose development was genuinely beautiful to watch. First of all is the obvious one, Nagisa Aragaki. First of all, look at her. This woman is the epitome of big titty tomboy waifu, and she has the disposition to sell it. Now, past that, Nagisa is given this grounded and emotional journey through the show. While Ayano is dealing with over-the-top villains, Nagisa struggles with how to reconcile with an old friend, dealing with injury, and finding what the sport of badminton means to her. On the other type of the character type spectrum, but just as loved, is Elena Fujisawa. Elena could probably be qualified as a forgettable character to most who watch, but I got hooked on her the moment that she was just sitting in the background fixing her makeup while everyone else was practicing. But upon rewatching, I got to see what makes Elena a genuinely important character. Not only is she the one who kickstarts the entire plot by getting Ayano to join, she also works as the audience stand-in. Most people watching probably don't understand the finer points of badminton, so she works as a reason for characters to give a bit of information about the actual inner workings of the sport, instead of relying on some tired falcon metaphor. She's also just genuinely charming, and keeps Ayano's entire development in perspective by confronting her on multiple occasions. So, I was gonna tiptoe around this up until now, but we gotta talk about why this isn't actually that good of an anime. There's plenty to discuss here. Just as a quick first thing, there's this weird love story between this girl Yu and this guy whose name I can't even remember because this show does nothing to make me care about their relationship. If you played more of a part in the overarching story, this might matter, but instead it just feels like a sideshow to fill time while other things are happening. Now let's get into the three characters that absolutely tank the story's hold on me. First at bat is Karuko Serigaya, who is first introduced randomly at the end of the second episode screaming "I love myself" at the ocean with no context whatsoever. So here's the most cartoonish villain I have ever seen in an anime that wants to take itself seriously. Her gaudy pink hair stands out as a massive contrast to pretty much every single other character in the show, and she has a little servant girl following her around everywhere. All she needs is a Snidely Whiplash mustache to twirl and she'd be complete. But even Snidely Whiplash only tied women to railroads. Kaoruko literally breaks the Geneva Convention. The Geneva Protocol of 1925 prohibits the use in war of asphyxiating, poisonous, or other gases, and of all analogous liquids, materials, or devices, and bacteriological methods. When Kaoru got sick as a kid before her match against Aino, she kidnaps her opponent and coughs and sneezes on her for at least 15 minutes to get Aino sick as well. That is biological warfare and considered a war crime under the Grieve breach listed as willful killing, torture, or inhumane treatment, including biological experiments. Look, I get that you want the audience to not like a villain, but Kaoru just doesn't seem to have a reason to be this horrible. There's no explanation for her actions and no real consequences either, other than her losing. Next up is Connie Christensen. Connie's what happens when you actually try to humanize a character set up to be a villain in this show. Her entire identity from the moment she's introduced is to be Aino's foil, but somehow she just never makes it to that point. Maybe because Aino is meant to be Nagisa's foil the entire time? Anyways, Connie is introduced as this clueless foreigner whose entire goal seems to be antagonizing Aino until she just decides not to do that anymore. Connie is given this weird development where she learns the importance of family and being a part of a team, but it's about as clunky as used subplot. She starts out berating her teammates and demanding to essentially play alone in the doubles match, then goes to Aino and tells her that she's Mama Hanasaki's real daughter, not Aino. But somehow after her first couple episodes, she just leaves and comes back 4 episodes later wanting Aino to be her new real sister. And there's just not enough to bring things together. While kind of adorable, Connie is still a fairly horrible person who seems to just lack empathy and any social awareness, but somehow we're supposed to empathize with her after Aino takes a full turn to the dark side. Any sort of build-up to Connie's attempted redemption is undercut by how hidden it is. There's subtlety and then there's avoidance. Speaking of avoidance, we get to the true final boss of this series, Uchika Hanasaki. So I'm pretty sure weebs will not recognize this name, and honestly most American football fans probably won't recognize it offhand either, but Aino's childhood reminds me of the story of Todd Marinovich. I think that some football fans might better know Todd Marinovich as the Robo QB. Todd was essentially built by his father to be a quarterback. From the moment he was conceived all the way through childhood, Todd was trained by his father to be the perfect athlete. He forced a strict diet on the kid from the moment he was born and created games for Todd to play that were really just exercises. From what Hanebado gives you of Mama Hanasaki raising Aino, you can see that she had very similar attentions to Papa Marinovich. Uchika was a badminton star, but decided to have a kid. You never learn who the dad is, so she's really all that Aino's got. Uchika raises this kid on a strict love of badminton and would only give Aino attention as long as she played badminton well. There's even a scene where she straight up tells Aino that she'll only play with Aino if Aino can keep up with her mom, the literal badminton champion of the world. In the real life story of Todd Marinovich, he eventually made it to USC and won the Rose Bowl in his redshirt freshman year there. Then he got arrested for possession of cocaine the next year after losing a different bowl game. Because of the pressure that was placed on him by his father and the strict nature of an upbringing revolving around sports, Todd had crumbled. He ended up going late in the first round of the 1991 draft to the LA Raiders, but his career would be marred by drug problems that stemmed all the way back to high school and the emotional strain he underwent throughout childhood. Back to Hanebado, instead of continuing down this clearly destructive path, Uchika Hanasaki stops partway through and does something even worse than giving her daughter crippling anxiety. She also gives her abandonment issues. When Aino loses that game to Kaoru due to literal war crimes, Uchika decides that her daughter isn't tough enough and leaves her while she is sick. She left her child in an extremely vulnerable state, both emotionally and physically, because she lost a stupid badminton match. Like, Kaoru is already guilty of war crimes and somehow isn't even close to being the most outlandishly evil human being in this show. I wanted so badly to immerse myself into this show's world, but Uchika Hanasaki's simple existence, or I guess non-existence due to her not being in her daughter's life, shatters any sense of realism. It is a contrast that is just too much. And I think that's where this show fails. It wants to be a gritty and real looking anime, but also wants to have the classic evil villains, and it just goes too hard to either side to really blend its way in the middle. However, there is one glorious moment where everything seems to work and blend together. As I said, the show ends with a big battle between Aino and Nagisa for the championship. Both are walking into the situation from either side of this realism to cartoonish spectrum. As I've been saying, Ayano has been facing wave after wave of just outrageously cartoonish villains coming into this match. She has lost all sense of self to the point that her face is no longer her own. It's not even the eye change that she would get throughout the series whenever she gave into her dark tendencies. She transforms almost completely into this visage of her mother, the woman who warped her into this monster in the first place. Her abandonment issues fold in on itself as she realizes mid-game that she wasn't alone in the first place, but has isolated herself through her actions since giving in to the dark side. While the lead up to this moment was trash, the visual payoff is amazing. Then on the other side of the net is Nagisa Aragaki, who simply just wants to play badminton out of a love for the game. Her journey to this moment came from a truly relatable piece of hardship. She was bullied for her size, she was passed over on by a coach she admired because he believed she was only good for brute strength, and then she was humiliated by a younger kid in a match to the point where she considered quitting altogether. But Nagisa overcame all of it. She trains as hard as she can, she proves to the coach that passed up on her that she is more than what he thought she was, and she plays through what is possibly a career-ending knee injury just so she can finally prove to herself that she can do whatever she sets her mind to. And it's not just the emotional payoff that makes this final battle so amazing. One of the things that always bothers me in sports anime is the athletes' inner monologues in the middle of the game, or any dialogue that happens in the game. With the speed at which competition takes, it's just unrealistic to me. There's not enough time to have those thoughts, and if you do, you've already messed up. Instead of inner monologues, this final battle puts a greater focus on the one useful thing Kaoru does, which is giving play-by-play that gives actual insight into the game. To the audience, who likely has little knowledge of the sport, a character who knows what they're talking about is invaluable, and I find it much more enjoyable to hear commentary about tactics rather than grunting about power levels. So all in all, Hanebado is a very hit-or-miss show. When it hits, it slaps. When it misses, it falls apart. But in the end, despite its issues with reconciling the realism of the animation and subject with surrealism of most of the characters' backstories, Hanebado uses it all to its advantage to create a show that should be considered among the best of sports anime. That's why Hanebado is an important anime. Thank you for watching. If you want to see more videos, you can tell when I just leave the script. I mean, it's gotta have something over here, right? So, yeah. I have an intro video to explain who I am too, so that should be important to watch. So you should check that out. Check out another video. I'm gonna try to make one every week. Yep.